When I was boarding the flight in Washington, immediately getting in, I never thought I would descend to being such a boring person that I would read budget speeches for pleasure. But I discovered that I had descended to that because the South African budget speech had just been given. So on my flight off from Washington, and I began reading the speech by Minister Gordhan. And I have to say also, I have to admit it, it sounds nerdy and boring that I actually read it with pleasure. Pleasure for two reasons. One is actually it's a very eloquently written speech full of very nice ideas. It's one of the best budget speeches I have to say that I've read anywhere, and I'm not confining that to your country, anywhere in the world, so it's marvelous. But number two, seeing the problems of South Africa, the slowdown in growth, the balance of trade situation deteriorating, and generally the situation of some despondency in the country, I suddenly felt that the world is such a similar place. Because when you're sitting in a country, it seems that, well, no one else is going through this. But it's a very, very similar story just all over the world. The tone that I pick up in the little bits that I've read is just right. You have to focus on growth. Growth is important. I mean, the fact that inequality, great poverty and deprivation has to be battled with does not mean that you ignore growth, you keep that up. And I notice in your policies that there is an effort towards that. I can give you one direct policy advice, and I don't quite know how you'll get there. We've seen from an experience of a large number of emerging countries that if you can get your savings and investment rates up, yes, you will still have turmoil, short period slumps in growth, but growth rate can be pushed up a lot. And in the case of India, this is just stark. India used to be a low saving country. Then in two steps, late 1970s and 2001 and 2, India's savings rate and investment rate just jumped up. And now India saves and invests like East Asian countries, and the growth moved almost in step with that. So I think South Africa ought to pay a lot of attention in stepping up on this. The World Bank, different in the sense that there are lots of new people, there are lots of new attention being given. One of the things that we are talking about is that we must not take the attitude that the World Bank is only concerned about poor countries. We should be concerned with poor people wherever they are, which means from the bottom end of European countries where there is, in this period of turmoil, there is a certain problem of poverty, to countries like South Africa, countries certainly like India, a large mass of people who are poor, we want to be engaged. And unlike earlier where the focus was entirely on just eradication of extreme poverty, that is people below $1.25 a day, we want to lay greater stress on inclusive growth, that the growth somehow pulls up the bottom as well. If you go back to the Bretton Woods, 1945 or so, the 1946, the World Bank is coming into its own. The amount of space that the World Bank occupied, World Bank and IMF together, in the world of lending was, compared to then, it's very small now. The lending space has increased massively, and the IMF and the World Bank together has not grown that much. So the view that was being taken by the 5 BRICS countries was that there is an increased space where other such banks, multilateral banks, could come in without actually encroaching on one another's territory at all. And I think that's the way in which the BRICS Bank is being viewed, is that the space of lending has grown so much, there is scope for a bank of this kind to come in, and the World Bank has taken a view that if that happens, that is most welcome, because there are regions, pockets that sitting in Washington you're not able to provide for, and so there is indeed some scope for that. But constructing and from scratch a multilateral bank is a very, very difficult and arduous task, and you really do not want to jeopardize one another's space because you want a lot of credit to flow very easily. So there is a difficult period ahead. The World Bank is a changing institution. There is a new president. There are other new people in the bank. And I think there is an awareness in the World Bank that there is greater need for infrastructural money in emerging economies. And we are looking at ways in which we can attend to this. So we are indeed aware. And again, if someone else comes and provides that, that is fine, but the World Bank could do better on that. We are aware, and we are actually striving to see that we can do better, and not simply to squeeze out another player from coming into this, but simply because we believe that emerging economies ought to be able to invest more in infrastructure. That very often means long-term borrowing. Because the big problem of infrastructure today is not bricks and mortar, but it is money for 10 years, 15 years, which private lending does not come in so easily, and the bank is aware of this, and we are indeed looking into it.